All right, let's look at these new Zenith models. Okay, A3817. That's nice. I think that looks really nice. I think it looks good, right? Nice little vintage re-edition. Okay, and what else we got? Not again. Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are talking about some new models from Zenith. Over the last few weeks, Zenith has announced two new models, one new reissue, which is the A3817. This is in continuation to what they've been doing for I think about 2 years now, where they're doing essentially one-to-one re-releases of historical models from the late 60s, early 70s featuring the El Primero. And this is just the latest one. The A3817 is actually in homage to the original from 1971. This was an interesting one because when the El Primero first came out, it was introduced in sort of a tonneau-shaped case and then a traditional round case. Now the round case, the A386, that one had the tricolor dial that we all know and love. And the A384 was the tonneau. The A3817 was the first one to combine those two. So have the tonneau shape from the A384 and the tricolor dial from the A386. And that gave us the A3817, and that's exactly what Zenith has recreated. And Zenith has been doing an amazing job at these recreations because I think next to maybe Breitling, they're some of the best at these vintage recreations. They're one for one, they match all the dimensions. Of course, they have the same movement even because the El Primero has been going on since 1969. But it's even a 37mm, it has the gate for a ladder bracelet. I love how committed they are to the reissue. There are some companies who they'll take little bits and pieces and then call it sort of a reissue, but the dimensions are all off. Or they'll just use a ton of inspiration from the past, make it neither here nor there. It doesn't really look modern. It's got a ton of patina. It just doesn't really work. But what Zenith has done, and because of the fact that they're able to use the same movement that they're still currently using, it means they're able to truly make recreations. It's as if these were being made from 1969 till today. You just have a warranty instead of having to worry about what 50 years of use has done to the movement. So in my view, another great addition to Zenith's Revival series. And at $8,400, yeah, it's not cheap, but when you consider there were only 1,000 pieces of the original made and they're highly sought after within the Zenith collector community, it ends up being a pretty good bargain, and it's a great way to get into that vintage look, even vintage dimensions, but without having to worry about owning, a 40 or 50-year-old watch. The second release is another variant on their divisive Chronomaster Sport. Now, I did an entire video on the Chronomaster Sport, and I went into detail as to why this isn't an homage of the Daytona. However, there are still obviously a lot of very Daytona-esque cues, and that continues on with their rose gold variant. This $21,000 variant is mechanically identical to the steel variant we saw earlier this year. The big difference, of course, is that the case is now in rose gold. It uses the white dial just like on the white dial steel variant, albeit with rose gold indices, and it is on a calf leather strap with rubber lining, as is the habit for Zenith. And I think that's a great thing that they do, that all of their leather straps, they all have rubber lining, so they're still comfortable when it's hot, but you get that elegance of leather. And of course, now is the time to cue in the comments that, oh, this looks just like the rose gold Daytona. And yes, they do look similar. However, of course, the same differences stand. Things like the tricolor, things like the shape of the case. If you look at the Chronomaster case and actually move it around, you'll notice it's a very different shape to the Daytona when you look at it from other angles. A lot of those hero shots make them look very similar because it's all bezel. But when you look at the actual case shape itself, you notice a lot more differences. If you put a Daytona next to a Chronomaster, you'll notice right away. And this is the same Chronomaster case, give or take, as the previous generation that didn't have the ceramic bezel, and there it's obviously much more apparent. And the comparison to the rose gold Daytona mechanically is obviously also consistent as well. These are two very different approaches to a chronograph. The Daytona now being the somewhat more traditional or modern traditional view of a chronograph. So column wheel, vertical clutch, high power reserve, but with a traditional 28.8 beat rate. Nothing really reinventing the wheel, just making the wheel more round, so to speak. Meanwhile, the caliber 3600 inside the Chronomaster Sport, that follows the original Zenith ethos, which is making things as modern and as precise as possible. So we're still talking a 36,000 VPH movement, and with a very respectable 55 hours of power reserve. However, it also features a silicone escapement, and the big difference between this and its predecessor is it features the 1/10 of a second complication. And this is something the Rolex can't do. It can actually measure a 1/10 of a second, and that's what it makes use of the bezel for. So no more superfluous tachymeters that no one even knows how to use. Instead, it's just very simple, a 1/10 of a second, and that makes sense. In nearly everything that one does time with a certain level of precision, it's a 1/10 of a second, not an 1/8 of a second that sort of matters, and that's a measurement. If you're timing someone sprinting, you want to tell them, oh yeah, and 2/10 of a second, not, 5/8. So it's one of those things where it is marginally more practical, but more importantly, it is just a more modern and advanced way of approaching a chronograph, whereas the Rolex focus is making it contemporary, but also not really pushing the boundaries anymore. It's more just making the existing thing that little bit better and more efficient. And Rolex is great at that. That being said though, this wouldn't be a new release video where I don't at least give a little bit of a suggestion of how I think they could have done it, and especially in this case, how they could have done it to further differentiate it from the Rolex. The first thing is, of course, I still maintain they should put this on the Defy bracelet, and I think especially putting it on a rose gold Defy bracelet, it would look very different from the Rolex. On top of that, Rolex never uses the ceramic bezel with its full rose gold bracelets, so that's a great way for them to win a few differentiation points as well by doing what Rolex doesn't. And then lastly, I think it would be great if they actually included that shark tooth pattern that we see on the A3817 onto this. I think that would go a long way to really differentiate the dial and make this stand out even more, even in those dead-on hero shots. And now bringing it quickly back to the pricing. Of course, when we talk about pricing, everyone says, okay, resale value, resale value. Obviously, this has just been released, so we don't really know the pre-owned value of this $21,000 Zenith. However, if you do look at the prices of the steel Chronomaster Sport, they've maintained around retail. And while most people say, oh, that's not impressive, it's important to remember, watches depreciate. The majority of watches depreciate like bricks. Zenith especially isn't very good with value retention, so the fact that it's holding its value, that is priced at around the $10,000 that the steel one is worth, and this gold one does the same thing, that'll be a great achievement. It shows that Zenith's gamble paid off and that people are recognizing how good and how impressive this Zenith is. And even more so if that happens in gold, because also precious metals in general are more prone to depreciation versus steel. So it'd be interesting to see how this performs on the pre-owned market, but if the steel one is anything to go by, then this is probably going to be quite a success for Zenith. But in any case, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these two new releases? Which one is your favorite and why? And what do you want to see from Zenith in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches as you've seen throughout this video and all my others, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.